So namaskar and a very good evening to all. We are back with one more webinar under the banner of Institute of Climate Change Research, the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. As you can see, the way the rainfall pattern has changed, we thought that we should be continuing with a series of webinars where mathematical modeling is also included, and we try to throw light about how we go for projections and predictions of the meteorological parameters. So as you are aware, Institute of Climate Change Research started the concept of conducting webinars right from May 25th, 2020. And since then, there was no looking back for us. We have had 5 webinars independently. And besides that, we have had 8 webinars in collaboration with the Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat. Now, starting today onwards, we will be having 4 webinars in collaboration with Office of International Affairs, for which we also have Professor Dhanesh Patel sir with us today. So, as you know that the subject of climate change is affecting almost all aspects of our lives. But what works behind that when we talk about modeling? Mathematics is an important part, important component. So we thought that who would be better other than Dr. Amit Apte to start with on this series of webinars with mathematical modeling as the theme. Today we have with us a very, very eminent speaker, Dr. Amit Apte, who is at present working with the International Center for Theoretical Sciences at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Bangalore. And he is going to talk on a very interesting topic of merging dynamics with data, a mathematical perspective on climate change. It would be I would also like to share some more details about Dr. Amit Apte with you. Dr. Apte has done his physics, PhD in physics from University of Texas, Austin. And he has done before that he had done his MSc from IIT Kanpur, both of which are premier institutes of their countries. Besides the current designation, he has held very prestigious positions like he has worked with University of Texas. He was also postdoctoral fellow at the Statistical and Applied Mathematics Sciences Institute at Durham, USA. He has also worked as a postdoctoral researcher at Department of Mathematics, University of North Carolina, again, USA. He has also worked as a postdoctoral fellow at Mathematical Sciences Research Institute at Berkeley, California, Center for Applicable Mathematics, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research as a fellow and also as a reader. And then at the International Center for Theoretical Sciences, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Bangalore, first as a reader, and since January 2016, he has been working as an associate professor. To his credit, he has more than 40 publications in journals and conferences, and he has worked with many distinguished personalities like R. Govindarajan, S. Vadlamani, A.M. Stewart, J. Voss, Jones, Nurujaman, and many, many other distinguished people in the field of mathematics. He has been giving presentations, invited talks, and lecture series on his expertise at number of institutes. I take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Amit Apte. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation for this webinar. Since we are already slightly late, I will not waste much time and I will request you to start with the webinar.
Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Muzumdar, for this very kind introduction, and Dr. Professor Dhanesh Patel, and all the other members of the organizing committee for this invitation. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you about some of the topics in interested. So let me just start sharing my. Just hold on. Share my screen. Okay, you are able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so as was mentioned, I will be talking about how to merge and dynamics together. I don't know which one to put first. Changing between merging data and data. I a bit system and then the mathematical details of how to do this type of modeling. So in particular, so in case you want to leave after 5 minutes, here is the summary so that you won't miss the rest of the talk. What I would basically like to talk to you about is that, so as we all know, is a very complex system. In particular, it's a multi-scale and chaotic system. And two aspects. One is models, mathematical models of this system that help us understand what the system is doing, how to deal with it, and so on. Also, along with it, the observations. The observations are the ones that really help us build and improve these models, and also to predict these systems, predict various aspects of the climate or weather as well. So, combining these two together, the models and the observations together, leads in the field of earth sciences. So data assimilation basically is a set of methods that help us combine the observations with the models, and typically the methods use a probabilistic, and we talk in terms of making probabilistic forecasts. So this is what is essentially a summary of what I will talk about. Along the way, I will convey to you that there are challenging mathematical problems. For example, for these kind of high dimensional and highly nonlinear systems, developing efficient methods that can be implemented in order to improve our predictions or understanding of this system is a challenging problem. And currently, of course, we all know that techniques coming from various fields like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on are becoming important in a variety of fields, including earth sciences. And how to use these techniques for such complex like climate or weather is a challenging problem as well. So I will talk about that. The quote at the bottom is just, I guess I thought it was topical for one, and also I really like it because it keeps our feet on the ground, that we should not be overusing or misusing what is what is what we are part of. So the bottom part here is let me just start with a description of what a climate system is, and what type of models and observations that we have, and so on. So here is a picture I took from the GFDL website. There are many such descriptions available, and or any general climate textbook or even earth sciences textbook will have a description of this form. That climate consists of many different. So of course there is 1 second. Let me okay. Yeah. So of course there are the traditional components which have been modeled for quite some time, about 100 odd years now, with differential equations, in particular Navier-Stokes, atmosphere, ocean, the main input of energy, which is solar radiation, volcanic impact, marine biology, And along with it, there are slightly more complicated parts of this system. The snow and the ice, clouds, precipitation, which is of course extremely important topic for countries like India and in general tropical countries. And that interacts with evaporation from the land, rivers, and all other water related processes. And these also interact with various atmospheric gases, even though they are trace gases, aerosols, CO2, and vegetation, agriculture, various ecosystems, and finally the human activities, which is what is affecting all of these in a major way now. So climate is a complicated and a complex system, but it's not just complicated; it's actually complex. So what do I mean by that? So there are many different components, as I listed above, that interact with each other. It's not that one part affects the other and not the other way around. Vegetation affects agriculture, that affects evaporation, that affects precipitation, but which again affects agriculture and vegetation, and so on and so forth. So these are all interrelated components interacting, and these interactions give rise to emergent phenomena which are difficult or essentially impossible to predict from the properties of simply the parts of this system. So if you just know about atmosphere, and then you say, okay, I will just think about vegetation as something that's added on then that doesn't work. There are phenomena that happen that are effects of all these interactions put together. And they happen at many different scales, many different spatial scales, going from cloud formation, for example. It's something that happens over millimeters to micrometers, whereas or over or over the whole country. Whereas there are also much larger scale events like glacial cycles over the whole globe. And so there are many spatial scales as well as temporal scales. So rainfall can come and go in a few minutes, or glacial cycles which last for several tens of thousands of years. And so the spatial and temporal scales are vast. So that's what makes it really complex. For example, when I teach a class, I like to give an example of something that satisfies the definition, in this case complexity, but something that does not satisfy that definition. So here is one example. So think of a factory, for example. It also parts. It's complicated. There are small things, there are big things, they are all put together in complicated ways, but it's not really a complex system in the sense which I described earlier. There are lots of parts, but the outcome is predictable. It can be controlled. There are no emergent phenomena. Each part, we know how it interacts with something else, we control it, and we can control the outcome. Hopefully, luckily. If that didn't work, then of course many factories will just not work well. And that's what goes wrong when the factories don't work well. So that's not complex. That's just complicated. We need to take care of every parts, but we know how to do that. That's not the complex system is much more than just lots of parts put together. And climate is one such example. Of course, there are lots of examples from biology as well. Okay, and this complex system is changing, as we know, from a large number of observations now. So all of you must have seen these kind of images of, for example, in this case, the retreating Arctic sea ice, North Pole. The extent of the sea ice has been decreasing over last several decades, and this is just an example of how it decreased for last 30 years. Retreating glaciers over maybe 100 years or 50 years even sometimes, depending on which area. The glacier retreated significantly in parts of the world, as well as changes in temperature, the global warming phenomena, and that's also very well known. So here is, for example, what you see here. Let me see if I can point it out. At the bottom is basically the yearly cycle of temperature going from January to December in the years part of the previous century. This is around 1880 to 1900. And on the top side are the changes in temperature during the current part of this century. so 2000s to 2010s to 2020s. So there is a significant change in the temperature of the order of 1 to 2 degrees. Of course, that's very different in different parts of the globe, but overall the temperature has definitely gone up. This is not just uniform, it's quite different in different parts of the globe. For example, the northern extratropics have warmed more than the southern, as it's shown in the example here. This is the change in temperature in the northern regions, whereas this is in the southern region. So the change in temperature here and the change in temperature here is significantly different. So this was at a broad scale, north and south. Even at a much more local scale, for example, if you look at changes in India, the changes in terms of rainfall are also can be seen now. So here is a figure taken from the study about how changes have happened over the last century, half a century, in terms of how many millimeters per decade of rainfall change has happened now. And this clearly shows that the changes are not analogous, they're different, and even the sign is different. In some parts, the changes may be positive, whereas in some other parts, the changes may be negative, shown by these blue and red colors and so on. So fast, very complex, as I was talking about earlier, right? Okay, the changes basically indicate that something that's obvious in some sense is that it's a time evolving system. It's a system that changes in time, and hence what we need in order to study this system is a method to understand how to understand this evolution time. Is coming to picture. Software significantly, I am assuming that he's going to talk about. So here is just a quick summary of systems that are involved in climate models these days. That includes the atmosphere, the ocean, sea ice. It also the ecology are included in the models in some of the most complicated these. So these models help us understand the evolution of the climate system with time. But by the way, I think if there are pertinent questions at appropriate times, I can't see the chat window right now because I'm sharing the screen, but the host can decide whether they want to take up the questions in the middle or at the end of the talk. Either way is fine for me. Just let me know.
Sir, we'll take it at the end of the talk.
Okay, that sounds fine. And then, because I can't see anybody, so it's difficult to know what's happening. So these kind of complex models are what I use now in order to understand this time evolution of this system. So just as a mathematical interlude now, I will come back to this in more detail later. But basically, the mathematical representation of this system is simple in terms of a dynamical model. So given a state at time t, we would like to understand what the state is at later times s is greater than t. And that's a time evolving model. So some of the models that people probably know about, some of them are quite well known. For the Lorentz 63 model, which is what brought the effect of chaos into much more popular imagination, the famous butterfly effect and butterfly attractor of that model. There are many other similar chaotic models that are commonly used in earth sciences. In particular, they're used for understanding the mathematical aspects of these type of dynamical systems. They are usually small dimensional. In this case, is the dimension of the system, and they are anywhere between 3 to 40, 100,000 dimensions. Whereas the actual models that are used for realistic simulations typically have dimensions which are much, much higher. It could be 1,000 dimensional, maybe even a million, 10 million dimensional, or 100 million dimensions. And that's not uncommon these days. There are two types of models. One is possibly deterministic. In this case, usually these models are complex enough that. A model is, I'm implementing, what I'm indicating mathematically as simply f going from time t to plus 1 is basically usually a complex large computer code that helps us to solve this model. Other type of model could be stochastic. In this case, not only do we have the usual complicated computer code, but also we have to take care of the stochasticity or the noise in the model. And both these types of models are now commonly used. So I think the details of this modeling aspect will be covered by Professor Budd in the talk next week. I'm looking forward to it. In fact, I'm hoping I will be able to see it well. Without spending too much more time, let me point to a very specific characteristic of this model that I will that the models are chaotic. Chaotic, as commonly known, and that is an accurate description, is that a small change at some time. So if you take a system and make a small change at some time, it leads to a very large change at a later time. And that is what is commonly known as chaos. Technically, what this basically means is that the system has what is called positive Lyapunov exponents. The Lyapunov exponents are quantities that describe the rate of change of divergence of initial conditions from each other. And so positive Lyapunov exponents lead to exponential divergence. So very small changes initially will quickly lead to very large exponential changes at a later time. And that is what is the effect of chaos gives you. One specific consequence that I will come to later as well is the growth of uncertainty. So if you have a small uncertainty, something that you don't know enough at some time, that small uncertainty leads to a very large uncertainty later on because of this chaotic nature of the system. For example, that's why it's difficult to predict the weather. And when we think about the uncertainty, then we naturally need a statistical or the probabilistic description of this kind of system. So for example, when we make forecasts, these forecasts are in terms of probabilities rather than purely deterministic forecast. And in order to then do this, we need observations clearly. If we don't have enough observations, we cannot predict these kind of systems well. So just as again, as an example of something that is not chaotic, traffic is not really chaotic. Traffic is complicated. It may be even complex sometimes, but it's not chaotic. It's just, well, it's basically just complicated. Or actually, it's more like stochastic or probabilistic. So that's a debatable issue, but anyway. Now, in addition to these chaotic systems, of course, we need observations, as I said. So climate system is now being observed quite extensively. So again, this is a picture from this web page here. There is a whole variety of observations that we are using now that includes satellite data, data from the ground, radars, thermometers, aeroplanes, ships, and ocean buoys, and a whole variety of such observations that are being used extensively in order to understand this system. So in particular, in the context of India, this is one particular source of data sets. There are others as well. MOSDAQ of ISRO has an extensive observational data set available of very high resolution with many different variables for many different types of events like monsoon or sea, the oceans, heat waves, and rainfall, and so on and so forth. So these kind of observations, of course, are quite necessary. And how do we now represent the mathematical aspects of these observations? So if you have observations, I'm calling these y, at various times, t1, t2, t3, t4, and so on, what we need to know is how does the observation y relate to the state of the system? So how does the observation operate? And this is known as observation operator. So how do you relate the model variables that is the model dynamical variables to the observations, is what is done by the observation operator. So for example, think of measuring the sea surface temperature from a satellite. So a satellite which is at, let's say, a few tens of kilometers above the sea level, and that's observing the sea surface. And now how do you understand what the sea surface temperature is from satellite observations? Of course, that itself is a difficult inverse problem, and that is called SST retrieval, among other things. And this problem usually involves knowing what happens to the radiation going from the sea surface all the way to the satellite, and how the satellite is recording these observations, and so on and so forth. So these observation operators are themselves include some of the complexity of the system, but in addition to it, they're also uncertain, right? So there are always observational errors. So we don't know, sometimes we don't know exactly the relation between the different parts of the system. So for example, how does the sea surface temperature and the radiation that is being observed by the satellite, the relation between two, there are uncertainties in it. There is instruments which have errors, and all of these uncertainties have to be incorporated as well. And so that leads to the models. But by the way, just a question, can you see my mouse moving around? Oh, can I hope you can hear me.
We can see a mouse. Yes, we can see.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, so these kind of observational models then include these two parts of the system. One, which is known as the observation operator, and the uncertainties of the system, right? And so the natural question then is to how do we combine the observations and the models together? So that's what I will come to now. How do you merge the models with the data? And that is the field, as I mentioned earlier, what that is known as data assimilation. So let me step back and start with something much simpler. Okay, so just a picture. Suppose I'm standing on a seashore somewhere, let's say here, where the birds are, and I want to understand whether I will get my feet wet or not. How will you go about solving this problem? Of course, if you're a mathematician, not of course, but some mathematicians would then go back, go to the lab, and turn on a computer, create a computer model of the seashore, and try to answer this question. Okay, I'm not sure which mathematicians do it, but some may. So these type of questions is what data assimilation actually will refer to. As I said, let me step back a little bit. Let's look at some much simpler questions. So for example, the couple of questions at the beginning. These questions are something that can be answered by fairly well-known and certain methods. So solar eclipses, or comets, or planets and satellites around the planets, and all these things behave in a way that on a time scale of interest, thousands of years, hundreds of years, are not chaotic. They are regular motions, and we can make these predictions in a generally straightforward way. When you go to chaotic systems, for example, double pendulum, take two pendula and attach them to each other, and that becomes a system that is chaotic. Very simple, but chaotic system. So for that kind of chaotic system, making even simple predictions like predicting the angle of a pendulum is not very easy to do. In fact, it's very uncertain how to do this. So that's next level of complex difficulty in making predictions. As I was saying, how about waves? Understanding the behavior of waves on a seashore. So that's the next level of complexity. These systems partial differential equations, right? And the climate and weather systems. So for example, estimating temperatures, rainfalls, all of these fall into the next complexity level, which is that the models are on a much larger scale now, on the scale of the whole the whole city or the country or the whole globe, and so on. The last few sets of questions that I have stated here, for example, about stock exchanges, stock indices, or as I said, traffic modeling, these are usually done using stochastic models. these are not deterministic systems. Modeling these as deterministic does not help us. And so these are all stochastic modeling. This question, just let you think about this question. And the last one, which is inherently stochastic system, is, for example, quantum mechanical system, which are inherently physically probabilistic descriptions of the system, right? And so the kind of systems that fall into the purview of data assimilation are usually what are shown in red here. Complex systems which have chaos in it, which are usually described by deterministic model, but prediction is difficult to do. So that's what I will come to now. So in order to do these kind of predictions, a complex system, what we really need to start with is understanding the basic parts of this system. For example, the fluid dynamics or the thermodynamics or the biology of the ocean system and so on. And that has been done for the last hundreds of years now. Understanding these systems involve lots of physical parameters. So for example, how is the topography of a country? Does it have tall mountains? Does it have lakes or rivers? And are such physical parameters that we need to know. In order to know what kind of forcing we have. So what kind of solar radiation we are looking at, or are there volcanoes, human activity? All these forcings are also part of this physical system. Then, as I mentioned, there are things that are more difficult to capture. For example, clouds. So clouds form, as I said, at micrometer or millimeter scale. Now that we can't really capture, but that has an effect on the ocean atmosphere system. Now, how do we capture that complex behavior in the mathematical model? And that is what is known as parametrization. And these parameterizations are also part of these mathematical models. And so with this kind of physical parameters that involved, along with external forcing and unresolved processes, the things that we cannot fully incorporate, we need to incorporate the observations, combining the measurements or the observations into the model, which is what leads us to data assimilation. So as I said, the observations are now quite varied, but the observations are not uniformly distributed in space nor in time. They are quite sparse. So for example, the land-based observations, for obvious reasons, are much more extensive in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere, and various other types, right? So if a satellite is observing and if the cloud is blocking what that satellite is trying to observe, then you don't have observations. So the satellite may not be able to observe everything. So that also gives rise to the sparsity of the observations. And as I mentioned earlier, the relation of the observation to the system can be complicated. That itself can be inverse problem. And so these observations by themselves are not sufficient to specify the whole system completely. And so for those of you who know about inverse problems, you can think of this as a underdetermined, ill-posed inverse problem. So this kind of relations between the physical aspects of the system that we know, the physical theories and laws and so on, from which we can build models, and the observation that we have, combining all of these aspects of the system together is what I think of as data assimilation. So data assimilation is basically the process of the estimation of the state of the system. So think of weather prediction, climate prediction, these types of problems, which is the estimation problem. You want to estimate something. And this happens repetitively in time. So every year, every day, every 6 hours, we get prediction of the climate or the weather or rainfall and so on. And what are the parts that go into it? So as I said, we have partial and noisy observation of the system that go into data assimilation. The system itself is chaotic, and hence it has to be nonlinear. It's a complex multi-dynamical system. And we have models, but the models are not perfect. There are things which we don't know perfectly well. The models and the data observations have noise in it. So that's another aspect that we need to consider. And we want to combine all these aspects when we do the estimation in order to make a prediction and also estimate the associated uncertainty of this system state. And that is what I think of as data assimilation. Let me not spend time on the figure at the bottom of the page. So let me move on. So I already covered this. The observations are noisy, partial, and discrete in time. The systems are complex, multi-scale, spatio-temporally dynamical systems. The models themselves may not have all the components available, and all of this needs to be combined and kept in mind when we think of data assimilation. So the main mathematical ingredients of the model of this data assimilation problem are the dynamical model of the system. So the dynamical model that takes us from one time to next time, and the observations. So as I indicated, this is basically a model that can be either stochastic or deterministic, and it will be represented by a Markov transition kernel that tells us the probability of the state at time t given the state at previous time, a conditional probability of the system at some time given the system state at a previous time instant. So that's the model, mathematical model for the dynamical system. Then we also have the observations, and what we need to assume is that we know the observation operator. So this is the H, and we also know the characteristics of the noise in the model, which is what I mentioned earlier. And that is done in terms of the observation likelihood. So basically, this boils down to knowing what the observation, what the probability is of the observation Y given the state of the system X. The conditional probability of the observation given X is what is called the likelihood, the observation likelihood of this system. So we need to know the dynamical model in terms of the conditional probability going from one time to next time, and we need to know the observation likelihood in terms of conditional probability of the observations given the state of the system. Given all these ingredients, the main problem to consider is estimating the state at some time xt given the observations over time t1, t2, t3 up to tn. So if you have observations from time 0 to time tn, think of this as, let's say, the beginning of 20th century to the current time 2020. And so if you have observations over, let's say, 120 years, how do you predict the state of the system? If this is the current time, then predicting the state at current time is called filtering. Predicting the state in future is of course called prediction, as we are all aware. Whereas predicting the state in the past is called smoothing. So if you want to understand what the climate system was in 1950 or in 1900, or sometimes now going back 100,000 years, let's say a million years ago, what was this climate system? That is the problem of smoothing. And the filtering is what I will talk about, which is the problem of predicting the state of the system at the current time instant, given all the past observations of the system. So in mathematical terms that I have set up right now, the main object of interest becomes the distribution, what is called a posterior distribution of the state of the system at time t, xt, given observations from time 0 or 1 to time t. So given all the past observations, how do you estimate the state of the system at the current time? It's called a filtering problem. Filtering in the sense that it tries to filter out the noise in the model, in the system, or in the observations and in the model. So, and as I mentioned, smoothing corresponds to understanding the behavior of the system in the past, whereas prediction is the understanding of the system in the future time instances. Yeah. Okay. So this is the main object of interest, and what are the mathematical tools available to us? So the main tool is how do we go from time t to time t plus 1 to time t plus 2 going forward in time in terms of these probability densities now. So if we have the probability density at time t minus 1, how do we go to the probability density at time t? That is the main problem, and that is called the filtering problem. And the conditional density satisfies a recursive relation. The recursive relation is given in this slide here. So what it uses is the dynamics of the system, the dynamics which helps us go forward in time, and the update or the Bayes theorem, which helps us incorporate the observational likelihood. So let me not spend too much time on it, but basically this follows directly from the properties of the conditional distribution and the Markov transition densities. So if we know the density at time t, you can go to density at time t. If we know, let me state it. If we know the density at time t minus 1, we can go to the probability density at time t by using the Markov transition, which is the model, the dynamical model of the system. And then we can use the observational likelihood to update or to incorporate the observational uncertainty in this system now. So that put together gives a recursive relation that goes from time t minus 1 to time t. And I guess I'll be happy to share the slides with you. And if you have questions about these mathematical details, you could ask me later, or I can send you some references later as well. Okay, so just pictorially, what the process is shown here. You start at time t. Well, sorry, here it goes from time 2 to t plus 1, but you update using Bayes theorem or incorporating the observational likelihood, and then you do a prediction going forward in time, forecast to a time t plus 1, and this cycle continues and so on and so forth. So that is a two-step process. And that two-step process can be represented in terms of ensembles, or what is known as Monte Carlo representation of this density. So what this simply means is as follows, that instead of dealing with the probability density as a mathematical object, we deal with realizations of this or realizations or samples out of this probability density. So if the samples are represented by these xi, I goes from 1 to n, so n samples, that gives us a approximation or a representation, approximate representation of the probability densities involved. And there are two broad types of methods that are known as particle filter and ensemble Kalman filter that are very commonly used these days in earth sciences. The particle filter deals with weight representation of these samples, whereas the ensemble Kalman filter deals with particles which all have equal weight, 1 over n. So each particle has equal weight. And I will describe the details quickly in the next couple of slides of the main differences between a particle filter and ensemble Kalman filter. But the main idea is that we are trying to do this in a fashion that helps us represent the probability density in terms of samples. So think of this simply as follows. Just give me a minute. I'm unable to write on this, so let me see if I can fix it to be able to write properly. I will just stop sharing for a second, and I will come back to sharing if I can fix my writing on the screen. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I'm unable to get my pen working again. So, okay. Anyway, coming back to sharing the screen. Yeah, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was unable to write on it, and so I was trying to see what I could do. Okay, so so just coming back, we are trying to represent probability densities in terms of samples, and now in order to describe these samples, there are two types of or in order to do the filtering problem, there are two types of filters which I mentioned. One is in terms of weighted samples, the particle filter, and the other in terms of equal weight samples, the ensemble Kalman filter. So oh, these markings now stay on. Ah, too bad. Okay, so yeah, so the particle filter is a filter where we go forward in time using the Markov transition kernel, as I mentioned, and the weights associated to these particles or these samples are updated using the posterior, using the observational likelihood. So remember, PM was the Markov transition kernel associated with the model or associated with the dynamical model, whereas P eta was the observational likelihood. So, so this is a weighted sample representation of of the particle of the filter, and that's known as particle filter. Whereas the Kalman filter is a representation in terms of unweighted samples. And how do I stop? Okay, yeah, there. So that again, it uses the prediction which is done by using the nonlinear dynamical model, and the update is done by using what is known as Kalman filter. So it looks like a linear equation for update that uses what is called the Kalman filter gain. And I didn't talk in detail about it, but basically it is obtained from control theory literature and usually applicable to linear systems. But it's used for nonlinear systems because in this case, it's actually easy to use and seems to be effective in many systems. So the square root filter is a very specific implement kind of filter, but I will not talk about the square root filters here. So there are two contrasting properties of these filters. The ensemble Kalman filter is designed, as I mentioned, for linear systems. So for highly nonlinear systems, it does not really work well. It fails, and it does not represent the system very well. But the ensemble Kalman filter seems to work well in high dimensional systems. So that's a positive aspect of the ensemble Kalman filter. Whereas the particle filter, which I mentioned earlier, is a sampling method for which the dimension of the system is a problem. So the errors grow exponentially with the dimension of the state of the system. So for high dimensional system, the particle filter does not work well at all. But clearly, it does not have any restrictions for dynamical for nonlinear systems. So it works well for nonlinear dynamical systems, as long as they are small dimensional. So we have these two contrasting properties: the ensemble Kalman filter, which work well for high dimensional but linear systems or close to linear, whereas a particle filter which works for low dimensional but nonlinear systems. Combining these two and developing efficient data assimilation methods which work for highly nonlinear or chaotic and complex systems, but also high dimensional systems, is a challenging mathematical problem of immense interest currently in research. And there are several groups around the world and in India working on this problem of how to develop efficient data assimilation methods for high dimensional, highly nonlinear, chaotic systems. So that's one set of problems in terms of challenging mathematical ideas that go into understanding and modeling climate weather systems. So let me slightly switch tracks and talk about other types of mathematical models that are commonly used by taking example of specifically work from our group in ICTS. That is in terms of stochastic models for in this case monsoon rainfall, but this methodology applies to many other types of systems in the climate as well. This is an example of what is called a Markov random field model. This type of model, for example, arose in understanding. One concrete example where it's commonly used, one concrete context in which it's commonly used, is understanding images and analyzing images or videos more from image processing control theory literature. But these type of models are now being used, as I mentioned, also in the context of climate, or in this case, in our work to understand the dynamics of the patterns of the Indian monsoon rainfall. So the aim was to try to extract various factors of the monsoon rainfall from the available data sets. So this kind of probabilistic model will try to incorporate the domain knowledge, the Earth system knowledge, using probabilistic ideas. They also use the observed rainfall data sets, and in that sense conditioned on the observations. And the main aim is to try to achieve some kind of clustering, a clustering of the locations and of days. So different locations that have similar rainfall patterns are clustered together. Similar days that have similar rainfall patterns are clustered together. And we hope that this kind of model, that is the results are shown here, identifies the dominant patterns of monsoon rainfall data. Monsoon rainfall as given by the rainfall data. So in particular, this work identified 10 dominant patterns, and they are shown here going from the pattern that shows the smallest rainfall to the pattern that shows the highest rainfall. And so different days of the monsoon season can be clustered in terms of one of these 10 rainfall patterns. So there may be days which have rainfall pattern that looks like pattern 10. There may be days that have rainfall pattern that looks like pattern 10. There may be very low rainfall days which have pattern that looks like number 1, and so on and so forth. So that's what this model achieves in terms of finding patterns of rainfall in which the different days can be clustered, can be classified. Since I don't have a lot of time, let me not go through the mathematical details of this. I will just quickly mention the main ingredients of this model, and they involve describing the complexity which I mentioned earlier in terms of probabilistic description, in particular as random variables and graphs of random variables. So for example, what is shown, actually, let me just go 2 slides forward. It might be easier to explain this. So think of different locations in India, since I'm dealing with the rainfall of the monsoon Indian rainfall data set. So think of different locations in India as different variables. So each location is associated with a random variable, and each random variable either is discrete or continuous. So for example, the Z variable that I'm highlighting here could simply be indicative of whether the rainfall is high or indicates whether the rainfall is high in that location on that day, or the rainfall is low on that location on that day. X random variable, which is shown here, is also associated with locations, but that is actually the rainfall value. So that's a random variable as well. And what we create is a graph of these random variables, connecting different locations to each other and connecting different days to each other. So a given day is associated or is connected to its adjacent day, and each location is connected to its neighboring locations in this graph. And the graphs essentially indicate the probability distributions of these random variables, or actually, to be more precise, the collections of random variables. So whenever a graph, there are connections between the different random variables in the graph, you associate a joint probability distribution of this whole collection. And these joint or conditional probability densities defined by this graph of random variables is what is called the Markov random field, MRF. So, this is what I was talking about earlier. Variables Z, which are discrete, indicate low or high rainfall. There are variables X, which actually give you the value of the rainfall on that day, on that location. And then there are variables associated with different days and different locations, indicating what clusters they belong to. So we'd like to cluster these days and locations. And the clustering is done also in terms of probabilistic random variables. Okay, so with this whole collection of random variables and a graph that connects the different random variables to each other, and the probability density is given by the edges, what we are basically studying is the conditional distribution of these variables conditioned on what are the known observations. Remember, I said X was the actual observational data, the rainfall, and conditioned on these observations, we would like to understand whether the rainfall can be called high or low, whether it can be associated to specific clusters, and so on. So these kind of probabilistic conditional distributions give us the patterns by averaging over the different clusters. So they give spatial and temporal patterns of the rainfall. So not dwell too much on the various mathematical techniques, the Gibbs sampling algorithm that we use, and so on. But the crux of the model is that we obtain clusters or patterns of rainfall from these conditional probability distributions, right? Okay, so sorry, I will have to skip some of these details of how we describe the interdependency of these variables and what these edge distribution potentials are, and so on. But let me jump to, so to say, a summary of this. So the summary is that the MRF model consists of discrete random variables, which give some kind of coarse picture of the monsoon rainfall. The probabilistic model incorporates the domain knowledge in terms of the conditional probability distributions of these variables. And the inference or the outcome of this kind of model is a conditional distribution conditioned on the observed data. So that way it incorporates the observed data in order to the output, which is the clusters and the dominant patterns of the rainfall data. So think of this as something like a model reduction technique. Some of these techniques, for example, EOF and singular value decomposition, SVD, or principal component analysis, PCA, all of these kind of model reduction techniques are try to achieve the same kind of thing. This is the MRF model tries to achieve it by using probabilistic modeling rather than linear algebraic techniques like SVD. Okay, so this is the pictures I was showing earlier of the dominant patterns that we find from these MRF, and these can be also used to understand the dynamics of the system. For example, suppose today looks like a low rainfall day, pattern 3, and 3 days later we find a high rainfall day, let's say pattern 9. How do we understand the transition from a low rainfall pattern to a high rainfall pattern? Or rather than understand, what I mean is, how do we model the transitions from, let's say, high rainfall days to low rainfall, from the low rainfall days to high rainfall days and back, and so on and so forth. So how do we understand the transition between these different patterns or different rainfall events in some sense? In this case, of course, that is done using probabilistic model again. So the dynamics of these patterns is itself represented by using Markov chains. So the probability of going from pattern 1 to pattern 2, the probability of going from pattern 1 to pattern 7, and so on and so forth. Sorry, the graphics is not very clearly visible, but basically it can be represented graphically as a matrix. The probability is represented here in terms of colors. The probability of going from one pattern to the next pattern is represented by the colors in this figure here. And then that gives us a dynamics of these patterns. And these kind of dynamical models are also quite interesting to study, and they throw some light on the dynamics of the monsoon in a very different fashion than the dynamical models which I talked about earlier, the kind of models that use Navier-Stokes equations and partial differential equations and so on. So these fall into a very different type of category of modeling that we see here. So this is also, and as I mentioned, the techniques which I talked about, the Markov random field, it's commonly used in machine learning community to study, for example, images or videos. So these kind of ideas from machine learning or artificial intelligence tools in order to study climate and spatio-temporally chaotic complex systems is quite a challenging mathematical problem. Again, this is a current area of study over essentially the whole globe. Many groups all over the world are working on these kind of problems, and this is a very interesting area to go for in future. Okay, so with this now, let me not mention this too much. Just as I was mentioning, this is the summary that I talked about how climate is a complex multi-scale chaotic system, how climate models of different types, either stochastic probabilistic models or deterministic models based on Navier-Stokes equations and incorporating various different aspects of the system, atmosphere, ocean, sea ice, land, ecosystems, clouds, and so on and so forth, how these kind of models are crucial to understand this complex system. Of course, these models need the observations in order to be improved and in order to build these models and make predictions out of these. And combining these observations and models is the mathematical area of data assimilation, which throws a lot of challenging issues in terms of how do we use data assimilation in high dimensional and highly nonlinear chaotic dynamical systems, and and how does machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques will help us to uncover the complexities and to help us study these kind of complex systems. And so with this, I would like to essentially stop here. I will leave you with this thought, which is at the bottom here, and a little bit about various sets of activities that are going on around the world in terms of mathematical modeling of these systems, and that goes under the broad umbrella of what is called the area of mathematics of planet Earth, and that's an upcoming mathematical area. And Chris Budd is actually active participant in the ClimateNet, the climate climate mathematics, and around we can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Should I stop sharing my screen, or should I keep the screen right now? Please let me know.
Sir, I think you can stop sharing the screen. Unless if you want to go back, but I can see the questions. I think you can answer them without the screen. Yeah. So
if I need to, I can go back to sharing the screen.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
That was a very informative session. I'm sure that those who are into core research in the field of climate change, it was a big learning lesson for them. So I'll just quickly take up the questions, and then I'll ask Dhanesh Patel sir to summarize the session. So one question is that are we lumping the uncertainty in a single factor or a multiple dependent factor? It has been asked by Rahul.
By single factor, I mean, I'm not sure I understand what do you mean by factor, but let me try to answer it. So the uncertainty comes into two different places. One is the observations, and observational uncertainty incorporates, for example, instrumental when you measure something, there are instrumental errors, and those have to be factored in order to understand how to model the observational uncertainty. But it also needs to incorporate our knowledge of how the observations are related to the model dynamics, and that has to be also factored in. So that's part of the observational uncertainty. In terms of the model, what we need to incorporate is the parts of the model that we don't understand fully, that we don't know enough about. So for example, if we don't know the effect of clouds on large scale circulation very well, then this part has to be incorporated using, again, stochastic or probabilistic model. And so the uncertainty there comes from what we do not know enough about the model of the system.
Yeah.
At least these three aspects I can think about in terms of what uncertain aspects are needed to be factored in when we model uncertainty.
Sir, actually, he has extended the question that can we use distributed extended Kalman filter for highly nonlinear stochastic data?
If I understand what exactly he means by a distributed extended Kalman filter, then I would say using extended Kalman filter is essentially impossible for these kind of climate systems, or for any system which is high enough dimensional, because of the problem with modeling and time evolution of the covariance matrix. So for example, if you have a million dimensional system, then covariance matrix will be a million cross million dimensional matrix, and time evolution of a million cross million dimensional matrix is simply impossible. So extended Kalman filters are difficult, essentially impossible to use, and that's why people use in the context of Kalman filters, what is commonly used are the ensemble Kalman filters, but not extended.
Right. Thank you, sir. Then there is a question, or rather a request to comment on the influence of dimensionality on particle filtering.
So commonly, the errors in the particle filters grow exponentially with the dimension. So which means that if you go from a 2-dimensional to a 10-dimensional system, the errors will grow exponentially, which means that if you have, so effectively that excludes, a priori exclude the use of particle filters in anything beyond dimension 10 or 15 or 100 or something like that. And so for a million dimensional system, certainly it's difficult to use. And that's a very active current area of research to understand how to use particle filter effectively in large high dimensional systems. There are many ideas that need to be followed through. For example, there is something called localization, that the system is such that only local variables are related to each other, and hence only local correlations are important. And in some sense, what is important is what is called a local dimension of the system. Sorry, I can't really make it mathematically precise. I do not know a good mathematical definition either. I think nobody knows really. But the idea is that something that's happening, let's say in Bangalore, in terms of weather, will not affect what is happening in, let's say, Baroda right now in terms of weather, or over even next few hours. Right? The weather in Baroda is not going to be affected by the weather in Bangalore over the next few hours. It may be the case for last several years or days, sorry, several days or so, but so this kind of ideas about how to use the local in time and local in space information in order to improve particle filters is a current area of research. But just on the face of it, purely mathematically, the error grows exponentially, and that excludes the use of particle filters as such.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Then one more question. We'll just take up the last question. That to what extent does model reduction approach help in MRF?
So I would like to think of MRF as a particular way of, I mean, okay, so model reduction techniques are certainly useful in general, and MRF I think of as one specific way of doing model reduction. So we are trying to describe the system in terms of a smallish number, in this case of the order of 350 or so. Of that order, random variables. So it's a slightly different viewpoint that usual model reduction techniques are in terms of variables which are not stochastic. That's not always true, but most of the times. But MRF is a probabilistic modeling technique. But since the number of variables, in this case, the random variables are small, it is a type of model reduction technique as well. I would like to think of it that at least. And this is something that needs to be discussed and debated. So I'm not sure it's a universally acceptable answer per se, but that's at least my viewpoint.
Yeah, actually there are two general questions, like which country contributes maximum in terms of mathematical modeling, and is there any research paper related to this topic in which fractional differential equation is used, etc.
So I haven't seen much use of fractional differential equations in climate sciences yet. Stochastic differential equations, yes, but fraction ones I haven't really seen much. Which country? I will pass that question.
That's the reason why I did not pose it as a question to you. Because
I guess India is not one of them for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But we are trying. We are improving
yes, of
over
course.
a
Yes,
period.
that of course, yeah.
So this was a great informative session, sir. At least definitely for those who are in the core research field of climate change. I'm sure that this is a big learning lesson for them. I will request Professor Dhanesh Patel, sir, who is the Director for Office of International Affairs at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, and a great mathematician himself, to summarize the session. Sir, your audio is on mute. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening to all of you. Dr. Sanskriti, Director, Institute of Climate Change Research, Dr. Amit Apte, all participants, and my university colleagues. See, the idea behind this seminar is to encourage the mathematical perspectives of climate change research, how the mathematics can be more useful for this kind of for this kind of climate research, because the idea is it involves from ocean to earth. Time is also component, space is also component. As Amit sir said rightly, it's a complex phenomena, fully agree with him. We don't know whether it is a deterministic system, we don't know whether it is a stochastic system or not, particularly. And therefore, he tried to focus on certain issues regarding that this kind of information, which is partly available, stochastically available, and how the mathematical model can be developed. And if the mathematical model can be developed for this scenario, is it possible to solve or not? That's another question. And the question is, as he said correctly, as per his experience, that you may have a system which is complex in nature, stochastic in nature, and of course chaotic, and sometimes it may lead to oscillatory system. That's what he said, and therefore he put the concept of Kalman filtering and simple Kalman filtering and so on. And later on, he also posed the problems on inverse problems. And therefore, Professor Ratish Kumar, I have seen, he has asked the questions regarding what are the recent the SST model available related to satellite data and how the model reduction can be used. That's what he asked. And you have also explained, sir, very nicely that stochastic system, stochastic system as well as stochastic system means differential equation with certain noise and deterministic system with certain noise. And then you have explained correctly how this model can be solved. Not solved, but exactly how you have evaporated that what is the importance of this model when you have a temporal, when you have a spatial data and when you have a time information data. That's what, and therefore you have correctly posed 4 or 5 questions. These are really challenging problems which you have to solve in a different way. And that's what, these are all stochastic model in natures. Of course, Kalman filtering, a lot of people are using right now. Yeah, neural networks also people are using in so many things. So this is what sir told us. And sir, definitely your lecture was very informative. It is really encouraging for our students. Yeah, those who are, they know mathematics. Yeah, mathematics is a good subject, sir. Yeah, everybody knows. But the application of mathematics is a beauty, how to apply. I understand, as you correctly said, fractional derivative has no meaning, sir. Right now, what Lubin is said, there is a fractional derivative, but there is no physical meaning. That's what I know. So definitely I'm in D alpha and something alpha is up. They put some mathematical kind of things, but there is no physical meaning, I know. So this kind of questions, which always arises from mathematical, from reality only, and that kind of things, we would like to throw those lights to our students as well as our teachers, our researchers, our NGOs people, that mathematics has a very good role. But after modeling, we have certain kind of comments and solution strategy. That's a different aspect. Computation is another aspect of the life. And then ultimately we got the solutions and we compare all together, and then we get the whole idea of climate model. That's what, sir, you said very correctly. I'm very, on personal also, I'm very happy to see your lectures, and my whole university will be also very happy that you have joined and you have given good presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Dhanesh Patel, sir, for summarizing this wonderful talk. I would like to actually say that those who are not directly into the climate change research, for them, there were some new terminologies which they learned today. And any research needs a spark, an ignition. So that's probably what Dr. Amit Apte has done, because whenever we really want to understand the impact of climate change on any parameter, any aspect, mathematical modeling is definitely a part of that research. And without mathematical modeling, it would be very superficial, I guess, to understand the exact impact. So those who are actually understanding these terms for the first time, they can, I think the next few sessions which we will be having will be an extension, or will throw more light on this particular topic. And whether you are a mathematician or not, any climate change research will involve the concept of mathematics. So even if, like, I am a civil engineer and working in the field of climate change and water resources, I cannot finish the research without mathematical modeling. So that is the whole idea of having this series of webinars. And personally, as well as like Professor Dhanesh Patel sir said, that on behalf of the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda and the Institute of Climate Change Research, we are very, very grateful to you, Dr. Amit Apte, for providing that igniting spark in the minds of the young researchers who are probably in the nascent stage of their research, and those who are in the slightly advanced stage. I'm sure that this has given more concept clarity to them. So thank you once again for accepting our invitation and joining us for this webinar today. I would be failing in my duties if I don't acknowledge the support of the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Parimal Vyas sir, the Registrar, Dr. K.M. Chudasama sir, and the entire Senate and Syndicate body of the university, who have been the rock solid support for all the activities. We just have to send them a proposal, and their encouragement is always there for us. So thank you to Professor Parimal Vyas sir, Chudasama sir, and all the Senate and Syndicate members of the university for the constant support. I would personally thank Dr. Dhanesh Patel sir, Professor Dhanesh Patel sir, for inviting such eminent speakers for this series of webinars. Thank you, sir. Thank you for putting us across to Dr. Amit Apte. I will also thank the role of the communication cell of the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda and Blinkit.in for the back-end support and the logistic support for organizing this webinar. So thank you, Achal, Chirayu, and your entire team. But the most important of any program is the audience, the participants. So a big thank you to all our enthusiastic participants who have been with us right from the first webinar, and we are expecting your support in the future too. As you are aware that we keep posting details about all our webinars on the Facebook page of ICCR as well as the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. So a request to keep visiting the ICCR Facebook page, like it and also share it so that we can spread a word about the kind of programs we are doing. The whole idea of this webinar series is to create an awareness about the concept of climate change and also to connect people across the globe and across various fields to each other so that there can be some more fruitful research. So thank you once again to all, and we will continue with the next webinar tomorrow. Once again, thank you, Dr. Amit Apte, Dhanesh sir, Shwetal Bhai for joining us on the panel, and to the audience. See you tomorrow again at 5 p.m. Thank you so much.